Got my money on my mind, got my money on my mind, got my money on my mind.
Hey folks, welcome to the Jason Wright Show, Money Monday. Look, this is the episode dedicated to improving our finances, always in all ways. Part of our overall improvement has to be good stewards of our resources, and that's what Mondays are for on the Jason Wright Show. So with that in mind, let's go. Well, good morning, folks. It is Monday. That means that on the Jason Wright Show, it is Money Monday. And today's topic is something that doesn't necessarily have to do with the dollars and cents of investing and saving and budgeting. It has to do with psychology, and it also has to do with personal habits. And it all starts with a decision. So one of the things that Tony Robbins is always talking about, and by the way, if you've never listened to or read any of Tony Robbins' work, it is truly remarkable. If you go back to his mentor, Jim Rohn, you learn a lot of the DNA of Tony Robbins' success and who he is today. And you may not always think of Tony Robbins as someone who has advice on financial management, money management. That usually goes to guys like Dave Ramsey, who I think the world of as well. But Tony Robbins has a great deal of insight on money management, not the least of which is reflected in the fact that the guy's worth over $500 million. But the fact that he understands the mental aspect of money management and what it takes to get yourself in a state ready to make some drastic changes for your financial future. And one of the things that Tony Robbins always says is that massive change comes from massive moves. This is one of the quotes that he actually says, the path to success is to take massive, determined action. So here's what I would suggest to you today. Wherever you are in your financial journey, whether you're just getting started because you're right out of school and you're starting a budget and you've determined that you don't ever want to have the financial issues that you saw your mom and dad have, that you grew up around, or that you just look out in general and see other people having. You don't want that financial stress. So you've decided that you are going to take the reins of your financial future right now. Or let's say you're at the midpoint of life. You're in your 40s or 50s and you've just made some bad decisions and you know that they're not going to get any better if you keep doing what you've always done. After all, that is the definition of insanity, right? So you decide you want to make changes. Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to massively change your steps. You have to be ready to make some drastic changes. Now, here's the thing with money that's kind of weird. Some of the seemingly smallest changes in our lives can be absolutely dramatic. For example, let's say that you have determined that you are just sick of debt. And it may not even be that you're to a point where you've got collectors calling or whatever, but you just know that in the line item of your budget, you see that you're having to pay on something that you purchased and have gotten rid of 3 years ago because you ran up a credit card bill. I mean, that's the problem with credit cards, right? You can use those things to buy a shirt one day, but then 3 years later, you're still paying on the shirt. It's kind of a bad bargain. You've probably gotten rid of the shirt and you're still paying on it because it was part of this just snowball of debt that you were accumulating on your credit card. So you've decided that you want to get out of that debt. Well, the first thing you have to do is decide what steps you're willing to take. And you have to ask yourself, am I truly sick and tired of being sick and tired of this debt? And if you are, then that massive change may be very small. It may be something as simple as looking at your entertainment budget and getting rid of your Netflix account. And that, I know right now, some of you just shuddered at the thought because you are all up into Virgin River and you're like, there's no way I am going to be able to live without Virgin River. Well, ask yourself this. Virgin River's never going away. Netflix, not going away. It's always going to be there. What if you just decided right now in this season of your life where you've decided that you are going to reach a debt-free status, that you're going to put Virgin River, Netflix, and everything else that comes on it. You haven't seen the quarterback documentary yet. You haven't seen Drive to Survive yet, but you're okay. It will be there whenever you get through taking on the issues of life that matter most. Because you got to ask yourself this, which is going to contribute more towards me being the person that I want to be, having the financial future that I want to have? Is it going to be Drive to Survive? Is it going to be Virgin River? Is it going to be Netflix? Or is it going to be cutting that out and focusing on eliminating my debt? Now, what I just told you, I don't take lightly. I'm saying it kind of tongue in cheek, but I get it. I realize those moments of being able to come home, check out and watch something on Prime or Netflix, it is a great luxury. It's an escape from the world. And to decide to pull the plug on it is a drastic change. But look, if you're serious about getting your financial house in order, you have to make some massive change. And if you were to ask me, well, Jason, have you ever done such a thing? The answer would be yes. And here's what it looked like. And look, remember, it's all relative, okay? Some of us have bigger challenges than others. I don't take that for granted. But this was, for me, it was massive. So it was about 5 years ago. I had a pretty decent watch collection. I had actually been an advisor to a startup in the watch industry and got to look at some of the most beautiful pre-owned luxury watches that you would ever find anywhere. It was the company's Crown and Caliber. It was acquired by Hodinkee. Great company. If you want a pre-owned luxury watch, they don't sponsor the show or anything, but great outfit, great watches, great selection. But that's not the point of this rant. There came a point in my life where I looked and I did have some debt, and I didn't have the cash position that I wanted. And I had these beautiful watches, and I decided they were nothing more than stuff. They were holding me back from getting to the financial place in life I wanted to be with regard to having enough cash on hand for emergencies or anything that I might want to acquire that was more meaningful than a watch. And frankly, I kind of went through this phase of just trying to really realize what it was in my life that I had that mattered and what did not. I was also about to get married at the time, and I wanted to make sure that my soon-to-be bride, Mrs. Jimlin Wright, would be coming into a good financial situation. I didn't want her to marry me and then wonder why I had these beautiful watches, but yet only had X amount of dollars in the bank. That just, it wasn't the type of man I wanted to be for her. I wanted her to be marrying a responsible individual in every way. After all, that is the motto of the show, right? Improve always and always. And a big portion of that, and it's why I've dedicated an entire series and an entire day of the Jason Wright Show to this, is financial stewardship. And so I sold all my watches. I actually sold them to Crown and Caliber. They actually buy watches too. So I sold them, and this was a massive move for me. One of the watches was a Rolex Submariner, which is probably the most widely known, widely collected. It's the biggest commodity watch that Rolex has. Everybody loves the Submariner, and I look back on that, and that was a huge decision for me because it was the first really nice watch I'd ever purchased. I bought it not long after my first daughter's birth. Had nothing to do with the birth. If it was to celebrate Abby's birth or Ryland's birth, then I wouldn't have gotten rid of it. But it wasn't. It was just kind of around that time period and that time of life that I purchased it, and I made good money on it. But it was a very big deal because those of you guys out there, this is where, like, if we move from Netflix to the watch that you might be wearing, you're paying a lot on a car or something like that. Guys, as well as I do, there are those times whenever you look down at the Rolex and realize that you really don't have the money to be wearing the Rolex. You don't need that Rolex. You should probably take and liquidate that Rolex and go pay off the credit card debt, instead of looking like there was this term I heard back whenever I was at SMU that in Dallas, there are a lot of $100,000 a year millionaires. These guys that make $100,000 a year, but they walk around trying to present themselves as millionaires. And frankly, that's what I felt like at the time. I felt like I was just a fraud. I was like, I didn't feel like it didn't matter whether I was making $100,000, $250,000, just my mind was such that I'm not in a position where I have such financial security and liquidity that I should be walking around with something that luxurious. And here's the thing that got me over the hump, and this is what I want you to understand. Just like I said, Virgin River, all the shows that are on Netflix, you'll always be able to find them later. You don't have to watch them right now. I finally came to grips with the fact that this could only be temporary if I allowed it to do. I'll get rid of these things, and they will always be there to acquire later when I'm in a position to acquire them, where it will be no sweat, no strain. If I still want them, I can go acquire it. No big deal. They're not going to stop making Rolex Submariners anytime soon. Again, it's the most popular luxury watch in the world. Not the nicest, not the most expensive, but by far the most popular. And so they're always going to be out there. And this was a huge deal for me. So now I want you to evaluate your life. Look at those things, and you've got to decide, I'm ready to make massive change. I'm ready to do the hard thing. So how do you do this? If you're just sitting in a silo by yourself trying to make these decisions, it can be very difficult. So one of the things that Jim Rohn, who I mentioned earlier, was the mentor to Tony Robbins, said was that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Tim Ferriss says this all the time. So why don't you get around 5 other people that have their financial house in order, or better yet, are getting their financial house in order? Challenge 4 of your friends or 5 of your friends to just go into just say, hey, look, guys, I'm trying to create a cohort of like-minded individuals that are ready to completely eliminate debt and increase their personal net worth through good stewardship, good financial decisions, get rid of waste, and doing the right things. Would you join me in that? Create a contest, put in a pool of money. Say, write the plan and figure out some way to make it a challenge, game it. That is one of the best things you can do. Now, here's something that happens psychologically when we start to do this. Whether your decision is to put away $100,000 in cash or even $1,000 emergency fund, okay? That, Katie Highlander and I have talked about that. One of the first things you should do in financial management is have that security fund of just $1,000 in case of an emergency. Whether it's that, whether it is getting debt free, whether it's to buy a house, whether it's to pay cash for a car. So much of this is psychological and mental. But here's the cool thing. If you make that decision and you start journaling it and you just embed it in your mind, we have this thing in the back of our brain called the reticular activating system. And here's what the reticular activating system will actually do. Once you have determined that this is important enough for you, that you actually want to pursue it, then your reticular activating system, which is basically a subconscious scanner, is going to look for things that are going to allow you to do that. For example, that's probably what prompted me to go ahead and sell the Rolex. Whenever my subconscious was looking, my subconscious knew from the signals from my conscious that I had determined I wanted to alleviate all debt that I had. And I wanted to put myself in a better financial position and a better cash position. So automatically, my reticular activating system starts looking for ways to do that. And once those ideas come into play, they push them through to your frontal cortex, into your conscious mind, and help you do that. This is the same part of the brain that, like, a good example is the girls and I, Rylan and Abby and I, we always see this red FJ Cruiser. Now, it's not the same one, right? It's not the same one, but every time there's a red FJ Cruiser, we notice it. Why? Because we've made a thing about it. We talk about it. So now every time there's a red FJ Cruiser, we notice the red FJ Cruiser. Our subconscious is going to pick up on it. It's the reason why whenever you're at a party and you can be standing just kind of a few people from another couple talking, and if one of them says your name, even if you're in a deep conversation, you're going to look to that person. It's going to get your attention because your reticular activating system says there must be something important that has to do with you going on over there because they just said your name, so you should pay attention to that. So that's what the reticular activating system will actually do. It will help you know what to pay attention to. So whenever you have decided that you're willing to make this massive change, that you are ready to actually put your financial house in order, then your brain will start looking for ways to do that. And here's the even cooler part. Once that happens, then those things that our subconscious pushes into our conscious become priority. They become desires. You start to desire to do the things that at first you could have even thought about doing, because all of a sudden you've made those first few steps to moving towards financial freedom. And once you've done that, then all of a sudden it starts this snowball effect, and your reticular activating system starts to look for other ways and other methods to get those financial goals met. One of my favorite lines from Dave Ramsey is, live today like no one else, and one day you will live like no one else. There are very few people that are willing to live without Netflix, without cable, without the brand new car or the car that's even 2 years old. They're just not willing to do it. They're not willing to hang on to their clothes for a couple of seasons and not change them out. They're not willing to do that. That's how most people are willing to live. But if you are willing to step out of the matrix and live like no one else for a period of time, then one day you will live like no one else. The best part about it is you start to realize once your objective becomes financial freedom and getting your financial house in order, then those things will start to hold less and less sway in your life because you realize they come with a price, literally and figuratively. You're going to have to, look, everything is an opportunity cost. Every single decision. When it comes to economics, if there's nothing else that you ever grasp, you should grasp this. opportunity costs. Every time you say yes to one purchase, you're saying no to an infinite amount of other purchases or opportunities. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to an infinite number of other alternatives. And so every time you make that little decision to hang on to the expensive item instead of paying off debt, there's an opportunity cost involved. So I just wanted to make sure that you got to this point where you realize that you can listen to all the episodes of Money Monday. You can read The Complete Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. You can read the Wisest Man in Babylon or The Greatest Man in Babylon, something like that. There's all these different books. You can read every Warren Buffett book you want, but none of it's going to matter until you truly get into your mind, you're ready to make some massive change and take massive action. And what may seem like a very small act, again, getting rid of some of these little bitty things that take up money and resources, getting rid of those little things, they may seem very small, but I'm here to encourage you. That is massive. That deciding to get rid of those little bitty things that everybody else thinks they can't live without means that you're taking the first step to living like no one else, so that one day you will live like no one else, like Dave Ramsey says. So my message for you on this Money Monday is get yourself ready to take massive action. And if you do this, if you're willing to do it, then I can almost guarantee you will have massive money success. But you got to be willing to take those steps. Thanks so much for listening. Go crush your week, crush your day. I'm Jason, and I'm out. The information provided on the Jason Wright Show podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional, financial, or investment advice. The content presented is based on the host's opinions and personal experiences, and it may not be suitable for all individuals. The hosts and guests of The Jason Wright Show are not licensed financial advisors, investment professionals, or registered representatives. Listeners are strongly advised to seek advice from qualified financial professionals before making any investment decisions. The content provided in this podcast should not be considered a substitute for personalized financial advice. Investing involves risk, and the value of the investments can go up or down. Listeners are encouraged to conduct thorough research and consider their own financial situation and risk tolerance before making any investment decisions. The past performance of investments discussed on the podcast is not indicative of future results. The Jason Wright Show podcast may include discussions of specific investment strategies, financial products, or market trends. Such discussions are for educational and informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as endorsements or recommendations. Listeners should be aware that financial regulations, laws, and tax rules can change and may vary based on jurisdiction. Any information provided in this podcast may become outdated or inaccurate over time. By accessing and listening to this Jason Wright Show podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and creators of the podcast shall not be held liable for any losses, damages, or expenses arising from your reliance on the information presented. You also acknowledge that any investment decisions you make are solely your responsibility. Remember to consult with a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions. Always do your own research and due diligence to ensure that any financial or investment strategies are appropriate for your individual circumstances.